Alright, so I did a video talking about this new Russian propaganda rifle. That one right there. And a bunch of people got mad because I just did some figures like cocktail napkin math. Just some rough estimates to show how ridiculous those claims were. Because they're literally claiming that this rifle can make hits at 7 kilometers. As you see in these articles. And that's article after article. Not that the maximum range, like the farthest the bullet can travel, is 7 kilometers. They are claiming the rifle will make hits. And because it's a military rifle, they're talking about hits on a human-sized target at 7 kilometers. So I did a video explaining, like how I knew that was propaganda and it was total BS. Well, again, a bunch of people got mad about my cocktail napkin math. So we're going to go over something a little bit more accurate for math. Now, again, I'm not a mathematician, and when I'm going through this many numbers, sometimes I'll fudge some up. So if you see something a little bit off, not a big deal, but this will give you a rough idea of what you're looking for or what people are talking about when they're talking about like rifles capabilities measured in like MOA or mils. I had to pull it down because I made some major mathematical errors. In my defense, I don't shoot at these kind of ranges, so if something's way jacked up, I'm not going to notice. Now, bring that back to like inside of 1,000 yards, if something's jacked up, yeah, I'm going to notice. Because those are realistic ranges I've already done the math for and I'm familiar with. So if there's an error, I notice it. So you're going to see some unusual cuts. Because I had a whole bunch of people in the comments, yes, like the idea of your video is true. And the statement you're making is true. But they couldn't get past the math being so jacked up. Which I totally get. So we'll play the video and then I'll just put the correction in there. So for me, MOA just works better. Now, if I was at a range measured in meters, or when I talk about rifles accuracy, I measured it in mils, then yes, I would go with the mil system. It's a little bit more fluid. It's easier to pull up numbers quicker because it's all divisible by 10. But now you convert that to yards, and it's no longer divisible by 10. It's 3.6 inches at 100 yards. And that makes the math really difficult. If I was shooting at ranges in meters, then yeah, that would totally make sense. Everything's in a 10. The math is just easier. But this is America, so I do things in MOA. So even though that Russian rifle is probably done in mils, you're just going to have to run the conversions yourself. Because we're going to be talking in MOA. What does that mean? Why is that even important? How is that relevant to you? Well, it's a good thing you asked, hypothetical viewer. So, let's first talk about MOA. What is it? That is a 60th of a degree. So there's 360 degrees in a circle. Then you take that 1 degree, you chop it into 60 equal parts. Each one of those parts is 1 MOA, otherwise measured as 1.047 inches. Now the 0.047 is irrelevant unless you're basically farther than 500. So for all intents and purposes, inside of 500 yards, it counts as 1. Now you get out past 500 yards, well, that 0.047 starts to add up and you need to figure it into the equation. Now there is another measuring system because there's TMOA and then there's SMOA. So what that stands for is true MOA measurement, that's 1.047 at 100 yards. And then there's shooter's MOA, which is 1. It equals 1 inch at 100 yards. Unfortunately, the person that invented that and patented it did a really shit job marketing it, so no one really knows about it. It's not in common usage, so it's useless to you. If it was in common usage, yes, that would be a better system to go with. The reason they have it as 1.047 is because they're talking about an entire circle. So if you're on a ship or something, like a battleship, where you have a turret that can move in an entire circle, it's important to figure in that 0.047 because you have to make an entire circle. So if you're like, come up, or go clockwise 300 MOA or something, you get what I'm saying? Like, because the turret goes all the way around, that's important. Well, in rifles, we don't worry about the complete circle because we're just looking at up and down, left and right. There is no complete circle, so we can get away with SMOA, which is in 1, but again, they advertised it poorly, it never caught on, it died. So, again, it's useless to you because all your measurements across the internet and everything are going to be in MOA or TMOA, not SMOA. It's just easier to go with the flow because then the work's done for you. So that's what we're concerned with, is TMOA, or as we just call it, MOA. So this 7-kilometer shot is 4.35 miles or 7,656 yards. What does that mean? What are the odds of hitting that? Alright, so where I'm about to seriously mess up on my math is I forget to move the decimal point. So what I did is I know it's 7,000 yards. I know MOA is 1.047, so I took that times 1.047 and I got the number 8,000 and something. But I forgot it's not 1 inch per yard, it's 1 inch per, or 1.047 yards. So you have to move the decimal point over twice. And that's where I screwed up right there, is I didn't move the decimal point over twice. So, a 1 MOA rifle at that range, best case scenario, no environmentals, no human error, nothing, the rifle shoots true 1 MOA, is going to print an 80-inch circle. So what does that mean? That's 4 times larger than a person. So in order to even come close to a first round hit, I'm going to have 4.4 people stand shoulder to shoulder, and I'm going to have to shoot center mass, and it's possible for me to hit one of those on the first shot. Now don't get me wrong, you could take a 5 MOA rifle that's capable of traveling that far, take a shot, and just so happen to land a first round hit. Not very likely, but there is always that possibility. And there is always the possibility with a 1 MOA rifle, you just so happen to just whack, and you land a first round hit. Is it likely? No. Alright, so with a half MOA rifle, that is a 40-inch circle. It's commonly accepted. Shoulder to shoulder, 18 inches. That's where they do a lot of reticles off of, like 18, 19, somewhere right in there. So, I would need at least 2.2 people standing shoulder to shoulder, shooting a half MOA rifle, making 0 shooter errors, making 0 environmental errors, and it's possible for me to get a hit on one of those 2 targets standing shoulder to shoulder. And I just want to express to you for a second how incredibly difficult it is to shoot a half MOA rifle a half MOA, much less make a half MOA rifle, especially in a magnum caliber. Extremely difficult. They're typically going to operate somewhere around 0.75. A military rifle that has military shooters on it, gets used a lot, possibly wore out, equipment's starting to fail, you're probably looking more like a 1 MOA rifle. This is realistically what would probably be issued, is like 1 MOA. Not saying it's not possible to do a half MOA, but you got to be firing on all cylinders. That has to be done perfectly. So let's say you do it perfectly, you don't make any errors, you call the environmentals perfectly, you're still not going to get a guaranteed first round hit on this side of the target. Now if you have 2 targets standing right next to each other, it's possible to land a hit on one of the 2 targets, aiming in the dead center on the first round hit. Also again, yes, even a 5 MOA rifle you could get lucky and happen to land one, but we're looking at statistical probability. A quarter MOA rifle, which you are not going to see unless you are in some sort of competition shoot. It's going to be a really niche rifle. That's where you're going to start to see projectiles landing on top of each other. That's just not going to happen in the military. Especially not with somebody that just went through like sniper school and that's their background of shooting or something like that. To be a quarter MOA shooter, your rifle needs to be on point, better to a level than I've been able to get a rifle. I can get some quarter MOA groups, but there's no consistency behind it. So my platform's capable of it, I am not. And I've been shooting for a long time. Not trying to toot my own horn or anything like that, but compared to the average person that goes into the military, I would have exponentially more experience, because when you look at the country's population, the majority of the population is in an inner city. Because I'm a country boy and I shoot all the time, I will have more experience over an inner city person, unless they have some sort of advantage, like they're operating a gun shop with an indoor range or something like that. So generally speaking, a quarter MOA is just not going to happen. And that's where you're starting to get to the statistical probability of being able to land a first round hit, because you're looking at a 20-inch circle. 20-inch circle, it's very possible. Now add in environmentals, human error, stuff like that. You are not going to have a rifle that can make hits at 7,656 yards because that's just not realistic. It's not going to happen. There are way too many variables. You could definitely have a rifle that can shoot that far, but to say it can make hits, I would expect at least 50% of the time. I would like to see closer to 90% of the time at that range you're making hits. That's just not going to happen. Now back to the video. Making hits at 7 kilometers, that's just not realistic. It's just not going to happen. I mean, yes, it's possible, highly improbable. And why would they even care about a 7-kilometer shot? I mean, at that point, you might as well just tape like a pistol to a drone, put a servo on the trigger and fly the drone over there and then shoot it with the drone. That would be way easier than trying to take a rifle and making a shot at 7 kilometers. A 10th MOA rifle, which is basically unheard of in military service. Yes, competition rifle, that's a different story. They're hand loading, they're loading for that particular, they'll actually like have a loading press right next to them, the bench rest shooters, and they'll load the ammo on the spot according to how the environmentals are. In that type of situation, yes, 10th MOA is totally possible. But having issued ammo and an issued rifle and a guy that has what? A year? 2 years of training is going to go shoot a 10th MOA? Not going to happen. Now, a bench rest shooter that's been shooting like all of his life and he has a reloading equipment and he's spent thousands and thousands and thousands of rounds mastering that shot. Okay, yeah, he could shoot a 10th MOA. Somebody that came out of boot camp with a year of experience in like sniper class with issued ammo and an issued rifle, dude, a 10th MOA is not going to happen. What's realistically going to happen is 3/4 of an MOA, 1 MOA. So how do you realistically look at a rifle and its accuracy and get an idea of what it can shoot? I prefer to go half of the accuracy. So for example, let's say I have a 3 MOA rifle. I'm shooting an AK-47, 3 MOA. Well, to be inside of 12 inches, you would have to be shooting inside of 400 yards. Because I like to go half to guarantee that I'm going to get a hit, I would call that rifle a 200-yard rifle. Yes, the rifle, like on a machine, a robot, like the Terminator shooting it, would be able to score hits consistently at 400 yards while I'm a human. I'm not a machine. I'm not a robot. You got to figure in the U into the equation as well. So I'd cut it in half. I would call that AK-47 a 200-yard rifle. Because that's where I know that I would be able to score a hit. If I had a 2 MOA rifle, again, a machine shooting that, like something that just absolutely has no variables, would be 600 yards. So if I were to have that rifle and I know that it prints 2 MOA, I would call that a 300-yard rifle. If I had a 1 MOA rifle, again, 1,200 yards. But I'm not a machine. I'm not a robot. I have variables. I make mistakes. Cut that in half, I'd call a 1 MOA rifle a 600-yard rifle. Half MOA rifle, yes, again, the machine could shoot it 2,400 yards, pretending that wind or nothing happens or nothing like that. But I'm not. So I would cut that in half and I would call that 1,200. So for example, because of this bipod error and all that crap and my own variables, even though I printed a half MOA and theoretically it could shoot, 1,200 or 2,400 yards, because without sandbagging it down, just normal shooting it, I get right around 1 MOA. Well, that would be 1,200 yards. Chop that in half. If I had enough trigger time on this rifle where I was totally comfortable with it, I would be like, I could guarantee first round hits at 600. Maybe push it to 800 if I have a whole lot of trigger time on it. Because again, you have to figure in the U, not just the MOA of the rifle. Now, I actually find it easier to print groups at like 300 yards over 100 yards. I don't know if it's psychological or what. But when I'm at 300, I typically shoot better than I do at 100. Shooting really tiny groups at 100 is really, really hard. If you can do that, give yourself a pat on the back, because that is a job in itself. It's very hard to hold the crosshairs literally in the exact same spot all the time. Now, I get, as the range extends, MOA does too. But say my rifle shooting a half MOA, and my heart beats and I'm just slightly off target, you know, a 1/16th of an inch or something like that, at 100 yards, that would put me outside of a half MOA group. At 300 yards, well, that's only a 1/16th of an inch on top of, let's say the rifle shoots a half MOA. So for me, at least, it's easier for me to print groups at like 300 yards over 100 yards. Now, past 300 yards, variables start to come into play. I think that's the easiest spot to shoot groups. So when you're checking your rifle, I kind of recommend you go out to 300 yards and test the MOA, at least for me. I mean, there are people that can hold a single hole at 100 yards. I will probably never be able to do that. I'm just not capable of it. I make too many stupid little mistakes to do that at 100 yards. Now at 300 yards, yeah, I could print like a quarter MOA group. That's possible for me. A quarter MOA group at 100 yards, it's just not going to happen. It won't. It will never happen no matter how good the rifle is. I shouldn't say never because you never want to talk in absolutes, because as soon as you say something as an absolute, well, something will come along and just screw that right the hell up. So I will probably never be able to print quarter MOA groups at 100 yards unless all the stars line up perfectly and it's my birthday on leap year and I just got kissed by Britney Spears, then maybe. But that wouldn't be something I could repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat. So, I recommend, now again, you can do whatever the hell you want, but I recommend going out to 300 because, for me at least, it's easier to print smaller groups at that longer range. Print your rifle. See what it's getting. Now let's pretend it's 2 MOA. So I printed a 2 MOA group at 300 yards. Well, what I would do then is I would take 2 and figure out how far I could go and still have inside of a human-sized target. Well, that would be 600, because 2 times 6, that's 12 inches. That would be a human-sized target. Now, obviously, if you're past 500, again, you need to use the real formula, which is 1.047. But this is just rough math, cocktail math, trying to figure out, you know, what you should limit your rifle's range to. So if it's a 2 MOA rifle, I can print 2 MOA groups. That would be a 600-yard rifle. But you have to figure in the U variable. So I'd chop that in half. That'd be 300. You print a 1 MOA group. Well, that's easy to figure out, 1,200 yards. That's where if a machine was shooting it, would be able to hit human-sized targets consistently. We're not a machine. Chop that in half. If you have a 1 MOA rifle, call that a 600-yard rifle. So on calibers like .223, it makes absolutely no sense, unless you're shooting at varmints, to worry about anything bigger than, say, a 1 MOA rifle. If your .223 shoots 1 MOA, that is more than great. Realistically, because a .223 falls on its face at 300, a 2 MOA rifle is perfect for .223. Now, you get the 3 MOA, I'd be like, alright. Unless that's like a pistol configuration, I'd be like, okay, I might want to try different ammo or change out my barrel. But like a 2 MOA or better for an AR-15, that's great, because that's within your cartridge's capabilities. Obviously, something like this, you'd want much better accuracy because you'll be shooting at a longer distance. But just go out, print a group, figure out exactly how far you can shoot and still hit a 12-inch target, and then chop that number in half. So, and when it's game time, or in a real situation, you'd be shooting at half that number of what the rifle's capable of. So the U variable comes in, because the only thing worse than being at game time is being at game time and missing. I mean, you're literally decided that target needs to be engaged and you miss. You don't have a team to back you up. You don't have air support to back you up. You're screwed. So be realistic about it. If you can hit a 12-inch target at 1,000 yards, that's great. I would chop that in half and be like, okay, I can consistently shoot at 500 yards. Because then you know you will land a first-round hit. Because remember, adrenaline will be pumping. There's going to be variables going on. You're going to be nervous. All that fits into the U. Just because the rifle can do it doesn't mean you can when the pressure's on. But that's how I look at my rifles. I look at the maximum of what a machine could shoot my rifle at. I chop that number in half because I'm not a machine. That's where I'd be like, okay, that's the limit. So the limit on this, because I printed a half MOA, I'm calling it 600 yards. Because I'm just not that good with the rifle and I don't have enough trigger time. If I had a whole bunch of trigger time, I could maybe stretch it to 1,000, but yeah. Not going to happen. But anyway, thank you for watching. Like to help support the channel, got my Patreon right there. Also have affiliate links in the description down below. Just by clicking on those links, even if you don't purchase what that particular link is for, just clicking on that and then doing the Amazon shopping you were already going to do anyway, a little kickback for it because you came there off my channel. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.